Hello, hello. Happy second day of Vlogmas. As I mentioned yesterday, I am participating in Vlogmas this year. So every day I am going to have a new video uh, starting from December 1st through December 25th. I chose to do these as lives because that was easier for me. So I hope y'all enjoy. So yeah, happy second day of Vlogmas. Yesterday's video, we talked about the updates to the Mexican residency process because the minimum wage here in Mexico is going up, and that's going to impact that process. The increased financial requirements might seem, I think there were a few of y'all in the comments who said, like, oh my gosh, this is like ruining my dream to move abroad. And while those increased uh, financial requirements might seem like they have moving abroad out of reach, I don't think that's necessarily so. Living a nomadic lifestyle might be the answer to that particular situation. We'll get into that, but first, let me introduce myself just in case there is somebody new here who doesn't know me or what this channel is about. My name is Adelia, aka Picky Girl Travels the world. I left the United States a little bit more than 7 years ago because I wanted to live the life of my dreams. And that's what I talk about on this channel. I share educational and what I hope is inspirational content to help other women feel empowered enough to go after the life of their dreams. So that means I talk about my life living abroad. I talk about my travel adventures. I travel as solo most of the time. And it also means that we talk about finances on this channel because I don't care what popular wisdom says. Money does buy happiness. And if you can get your finances right, that opens up a whole new world of possibilities. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, um, hit the like button, subscribe. I am trying to hit 20,000 subscribers by the end of the month. But if you want to see more of these videos, absolutely subscribe to the channel. Okay. And for those of you joining me live, hello, good afternoon. Uh, yeah, I think it got me. A lot of folks are like, what? Adelia's going live on a Saturday. I'll be doing this at 2 p.m. Eastern. It's 1 p.m. here in Mexico for the next 23 days. But these won't be full length live videos, just little short little tidbits and snippets. Okay, so I said we were going to talk about being a nomad as a possibility, a possible solution to being able to move abroad if you feel like you've been priced out. I think a lot of people have this idea that you have to have a lot of money. You got to have a six-figure remote job in order to move abroad or something like that. And that is not true. Yes, you do need some money, but depending on the situation, you don't need that much. I myself am a former public school teacher, and y'all know teachers are underpaid. So I didn't have a lot of money either. In the past few months, I've actually done several videos on this, and I will share those. And if you're watching this in the future, I will link these in the description. I did a video about, like, if you are too broke to move abroad, like, I ain't got no money, girl. Uh, how am I going to do this? I provided some options, and we'll put that in the chat. And all of these are videos on my channel. Another video, well, in that particular video, I shared some strategies. If you don't have a lot of money, how could you get out of the US for very little money? Okay, that's not going to be the move for everybody. Okay, um, some people have a little bit of money, but not a whole lot. And what was this, like in the last month? Y'all know I don't really believe in it's an illusion. Like how in yesterday's video I kept saying 2022 and it is 2023 for a little bit longer. Um, But another video that I did was I shared some of the countries in which you can get a residency visa with an income of $1,500 USD or less. And again, I have dropped that in the chat. If you watch this video after the live is over, I will link those. Okay. And I also did a video specifically for the folks who need a job, um, and they need a job abroad. I think where we are in history right now, a lot of people are very, very caught up in this idea that I have to get a remote job uh, from, particularly people from the US. I have to get a remote job in the US and I need that job first before I can move abroad. While getting a job in another country is not always the easiest route to go. In yesterday's video, I talked about how, particularly a country like Mexico, that is a difficult thing to do because you've got to prove that the person you're giving this work visa to is doing work that a native, a local can't do, isn't qualified to do. But in the video that I did called Get a Job Abroad, I highlighted countries that have critical labor shortages. And that means that they are more willing to look outside of their own borders in order to fill those needs. So there are options if you feel like you're getting priced out. But what I wanted to talk to y'all about today was another option, and that is being a nomad. Um, and by nomad, I mean not the life that I'm living. I live in Mexico City. This is home. This is my home base. Uh, it seems sometimes like I travel a whole lot, but this is my home base. This is where my stuff lives. This is where I pay bills. I'm not talking, and I have a residency visa in Mexico that gives me the legal right to be here indefinitely. I'm not talking about that kind of lifestyle. I'm talking about one that wouldn't necessarily require residency, but would allow you to leave the US or leave your home country and live in other countries for shorter periods of time. Now, why would you want to do this? Um, Maybe you are not interested in the traditional immigrant experience, like what the life I'm living, this idea that I'm going to go and plant myself in another place. Maybe you have no interest in that. Maybe you are looking for ways that you don't need to meet a particular income threshold in order to be able to live someplace other than your home country. Or maybe you haven't decided on a specific location that you want to live in. Being a nomad might work for that. Now, um, there are pros and cons to this, and that's what I really want to focus on. We'll start on a positive note with the pros of of doing this sort of thing, and you've kind of hit the nail on the head. It's really slow travel. When I talk about being a nomad and living a nomadic lifestyle, I think some people think, oh, that means I got to be in a different country every other week, every month. That is not necessarily the case. You can slow travel for 90, 180 days at a time, possibly, depending on where you go. So if we look at what are some of the possible pros of this approach, one, you can become a nomad basically on any budget. You can do nomad life that is like big baller, villas, flying first class. You can live the life that way, or you can live it on a shoestring budget. Um, And I think that is a benefit. Um, if you take this approach, you can avoid a lot of countries when you get residency there, they require you to be in that country for a specific amount of time. So if you, let's say you really got wanderlust on your spirit, but you've gotten residency in a place like Portugal that requires you to be in the country at least 6 months a year, there's possibility it's more than that. That might hinder the travels that you want. So if you approach your move abroad more as a nomad, instead of the traditional route. You don't have to deal with that. You can be where you want, when you want. Um, I almost hate to say this, but you know, it is true. Choosing this lifestyle could be a way to minimize your tax liabilities. I am not saying that this is a way to avoid paying taxes because maybe pre-pandemic, maybe pre-2020, when governments weren't really hip to the idea of people being nomads. But now that it is a more widely known thing where it's more, it's not unusual, governments are figuring out ways to tax you. But this is what I mean. Typically, in order to be a tax resident in a country, you usually have to spend more than 180 days in that country. Okay. Uh, that is not the case if you are like a US citizen. Uncle Sam is always going to try and get his money. But typically, and I am speaking very broadly because there are nearly 200 different countries. Everybody's got their own rules. But as a general rule, if you spend 183 days or more in a particular country, you become a tax resident there and you may have a tax obligation. But if you choose to live as a nomad, and let's say you go to 4 different countries a year, 90 days in each country. You're not there long enough to have a tax obligation in those countries. You probably still have some issues with your home country, the country you have a passport in, but um, and many countries will say like, oh, if you the source of your income is not in our country, you don't have to pay taxes. A lot of territorial tax regimes, places like Panama, uh, who else is that? Singapore? I don't know, but Google territorial tax, income tax. And then you can find more countries that are like, you don't have, it doesn't matter if you make your money elsewhere, as long as you're not making your money here, you don't have to pay us taxes. But you could plan, and 4 countries a year, that's not bad. That's slow travel. 3 months, a 90-day visa, that is that's a way that you could possibly minimize your taxes. Now, I would say you might want to double check because you would be on a tourist visa. Are tourists allowed to engage in commercial activity on that visa? That's something you need to talk to people who are in the country and kind of do your research on that. And another way that you could possibly minimize your taxes as a nomad, there are several countries in the wake of the pandemic who have created a visa category specifically for digital nomads. And one of the things that they often offer is they will allow you to stay in that country for a longer period of time. So, whereas maybe if you have a US passport, you could go there visa free 90 days, right? As a tourist. But if you get a digital nomad visa, they might allow you to stay a year, 2 years, 3 years. And in some of those programs, they will often waive income taxes. You just have to research and find out. Okay. Another of taking this lifestyle is that you get to experience multiple countries, multiple cultures. It's kind of like a try before you buy. If you're one of those people who you don't know where you want to go, but you know you want to get out of your home country. I'm looking at those of you in the US. We got a big election coming up. You don't know where you want to go. This might be a good way to kind of try out some places before you make the commitment of a traditional residency visa. Um, this lifestyle can start tomorrow. Okay. We talked yesterday about the visa process. When you want to come to Mexico, you got to apply outside of Mexico. Depending on how long it's going to take you to get an appointment, then within 6 months, you need to come to Mexico and finish the process. Depending on the country, sometimes it can take multiple months, maybe even a year before your residency visa is situated. But if you go this route and you are bopping around on tourist visas, depending on your passport, there may be no approval process, and there are places you can go tomorrow visa free. Okay, so if you need to go immediately, this might be the way to go. Um, and we talked about that. This avoids having to be in one country for a specific amount of time. Is so if you wanted to travel more, this works with that perfectly. Okay, so those are the pros, those are the benefits of being nomadic, bopping around, if you will. Now, if there's good, there's always got to be bad. There's pros, there's got to be cons. Okay. So, what are the drawbacks to this lifestyle? Well, to me, the number one thing is you got to take all of your stuff with you. And I am a minimalist, but the idea of not having a home base just does not sit right with me. I don't own a whole lot of things, but the things that I do own, like a big stack of fabric and my sewing machine, like I don't want to lug that around from place to place. So having to carry all of your prized possessions with you, that's not so fun. Um, Another drawback of this is, you know, to I to live the nomadic life, kind of like you see people talking about it on YouTube and Instagram and all that, requires a bit of passport privilege. If you have what is often called a stronger passport, which means that it allows you more visa-free access to more countries, um, it's very easy to become a nomad because you don't have to bother with paperwork. So you've got a European passport, Australian, a US passport. I think the US passport, there are 158 countries you can go to visa free or visa on arrival. Okay. Uh, that simplifies living this life. But if you are from a country that has a quote unquote weaker passport, and you've got to apply for visas and the time and the expense and the documentation needed for that. And yes, I know some of y'all are like, what? People got to apply for tourist visas? Absolutely. A friend in El Salvador wanted to come to Mexico, and we started to look at what the visa requirements were just to come here as a tourist and the way they wanted to be up in my friend's life and in their business. You got to have letters from your employer, you got to have bank statements, you got to do all of this kind of stuff. So there is a certain amount of passport privilege you need in order to really live this lifestyle, I guess, to the fullest, or at least the easiest way to live it. Um, the other thing is your passport determines which countries you have access to. The idea of bopping around or being a nomad focuses heavily on this, like I spend a little bit of time in this country and then I pick another country and I could go. Now, could you rotate to the same four countries every year? Possibly. But if you wanted to, like mix it up, throw a little razzle dazzle in there and pick some different places, That's going to be dependent on where you're allowed to go with your passport. Um, Living this lifestyle, bobbing around on tourist visas, also means that you have a little less protection. You're more uh, susceptible to the whims of different governments changing their policies. And I know you might think, well, short of another global pandemic, why would they change, how they're letting in tourists? Uh, was it last year or the year before? Y'all know I struggle with time. There was this big hullabaloo because Mexico decided to actually enforce its tourist entry requirement or limits. Tourists from select countries can come to Mexico visa free and stay for up to 180 days. Okay, up to is the important thing. And in practice, for a really long time, people automatically got 180 days. But then the Mexican government was like, no, cut that out. And they start giving people whatever they felt like. And so people who were living in Mexico on a tourist visa and would bop out, they'd come back, and then they might get 14 days to stay in the country legally. And there is no process for appealing that or extending it. So if you choose to be a nomad, you just have to keep in mind that yesterday's policy may not be tomorrow's policy, that things may change, and you have to be able to pivot and adapt to that. Um, so that's something to keep in mind. Um, and then the last con I have here is that a nomadic lifestyle probably has an expiration date on it. I don't know that you can make this work indefinitely. Yesterday, I happened to be watching a documentary about like why everybody regrets Brexit. And they were interviewing these older Brits who they had been staying in Spain, right? And then post Brexit, the man is lamenting how much, in order for him to continue to come to Spain, because now, since UK is not part of the EU, they are subject to the same tourist rules as everybody else. They can only spend 90 days inside the EU, 90 days in Spain. And that meant, he was like, that meant now got to pay to maintain a house, a place to live somewhere else, the cost of flights, the cost of insurance because he's older, you know so it's like, as we age, will we be able to maintain this nomadic lifestyle? I don't know. I think that's a possible drawback, that it may have a shelf life. It may not be something you can do until you're 95. I don't know. I think everybody's situation is different. Okay, so I saw a couple of questions there. Um, are there definitive guides to find this information for each country, either digital or hard copy? I wish there was. I have not come across any such thing just yet. Usually, and I recommended this in, I think, the Find a Job Abroad video, is check out the immigration website for the country. But y'all have also heard me tell you, particularly about Mexico, just because that's what it says on the website does not mean what you have to deal with in person. So I wish there was a definitive place, but I haven't found it yet. If y'all have, please share. Thank you for the super chat, Diane. Appreciate you. Okay. How do you deal with the double verification process to access your financial information, funds when you bop around, burst banking in other country, a lot of depositing and wire transferring? Great question. For me, and I have lived in Honduras, Mexico, Kuwait, and China. For me, this is one of those reasons I tell everybody to make sure that they keep a US number. Just the other day, I needed to change the address on my bank account, and they were gonna do the, what do you call it, the dual verification or whatever. And so because I have my little Samsung, it is a dual SIM phone. I keep my SIM with the US in there and I keep my local SIM in there, but I pause service when I'm not traveling. So in order to get the code from the bank, I unpause my service. Then they sent the code to my US number. I got the code and then I repause service. And typically, I have not been charged, knock on wood, when I just turn it on for a couple of minutes and turn it back off. Um, I also have a Google Voice number. And for most of my credit cards, for most of my bank accounts, for my brokerage accounts, my Google Voice number works. But this specific bank will not accept the Google Voice number. And so I have to use that. Okay. Um, were there any other questions in here? I met an American couple that can only live 90 days at a time in Italy. Does that really mean 90 days in the EU, even with a US passport? Absolutely. It's 90 days in a 180-day period, is what it is. So, what a lot of nomads or boppers do is they will go to the EU, spend 90 days there, and then they will leave and go to the UK or one of the countries that are in Europe but not in the Schengen zone, and spend time there. And then they can come back after a total 180 days has passed. Uh, multi-factor verification. Okay, I think that's it, y'all. So again, I'll be back here tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. So I will see y'all then.